So a very warm welcome, and we can now start recording. And the floor is yours, Matias, to open this webinar officially.
Thank you very much, Hilige, and good morning to some and good afternoon to others. I hope that covers everybody. I'll start with a round of thank yous. First of all, to the contributors of this 26th edition in the series on higher education of the Council of Europe, but particularly, of course, to the editors, Ira and Ronaldo, and of course, Shure. And I'd like to thank you, Hilige, and the International Association of Universities for organizing this launch. We very much appreciate it, because we think it's, of course, very important that the results of all our collective efforts is having as broad dissemination and echo as possible. I'm also very pleased because this is one of the first opportunities that I can introduce myself as the director of the new Directorate for Democracy, and I'm doing that because first because I think it's a really cool title. It wasn't me who invented it, but I think it's really good. But even more so because I think it reflects really how in the Council of Europe we strive to consolidate and reinforce our work on democracy in general. And within that effort, education has a central place. So the entire new Directorate for Democracy that is bringing together all these different strands of activity really builds around and on top and with that work that we've been doing on education for democratic citizenship, also for the last quarter of a century, also together as a part of the global cooperation. It's been a long time. That's 25 years, I think, now since this cooperation started, and for us in the Council of Europe is extremely important, and it is precious, and this is why we have been staying with it for all these years, and that's why we certainly have no intention to leave. And what's in it for us? First of all, because it is extremely precious opportunity for intellectual cooperation. And as surprising that may seem, we bureaucrats sometimes do need and are eager to participate, and it's extremely important for the work we do. And that is and the books in this series on higher education, like this one, and our global forums are a part of that exercise, which allows us in the Council of Europe to participate in this conversation, to tap into the knowledge and experience of the higher education professionals, academics, universities around the world. And that is, of course, of immeasurable importance for us in our work. And as I said, the two most important forms are, of course, the forums and then the publications such as this one that we're launching today. But it is not just for the sake of having that conversation. For us, it is important because it is we participate in it in order to channel the results and outcomes of these discussions and conversations into our policy making. In that exercise, again, this contact exchanges and cooperation with higher education professionals, with people from academic world, universities around the world, learning from their experiences, their ideas, their difficulties in using testing the solutions on the ground is of very big importance. So the very practical illustration of how that process goes is that last publication. If you look at it, and I have here a very rare paper copy of it, Higher Education Leadership for Democracy, Sustainability and Social Justice, how that matches the priorities, one of the pillars of the Council of Europe Education Strategy 2030, which has been adopted a few months back by the Ministers of Education of the Council of Europe. And of course, in particular, the second pillar of this three-pillar strategy, which is about social responsibility and responsiveness of education. So it was also the work that we have done together, the Global Forum in Dublin, that has supported and nourished intellectually again that exercise that is now the basis for us here to transform it into policy solutions for our member states. And for us, it is very important that this continues in the future. Again, that also continues in the future. We are already planning for the next forum. The idea is to return to Prague, where I understand several forums have already been taking place in the past, and I think it would be a very, very positive step to return to this practice, especially because we are having very good response and readiness to cooperate and host us from our Czech colleagues and the Charles University. And again, the topics that we have been reflecting upon for this forum, they are really closely aligned with the work in the Council of Europe, especially, I mean, in the area of the higher education. We really need, again, with you to have that reflection, collective reflection, critical reflection on ways how to move forward that is necessary for us to advance on the mandate that we have been given by the ministers. And when it comes to higher education, there's enormously exciting and important issues and projects that we already have in preparation, where we count on your ideas, support, reflections, and criticism, from the European Students' Charter, Student Rights Charter, to the work on the democratization of science and research, to the questions of academic integrity, academic fundamental values. So I'm really excited after these 25 years. I would like to thank those who have been here, part of that journey, some of you from the beginning. I'd like to thank Shure in particular, somebody who has been on our side, really a pillar of that exercise, and we're all trying to sort of replace him that as well as we can. But I'm also looking very much forward for the years that are still ahead of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Very nice confirmation of the importance of this work, where I hope that indeed that work is meant to have a bright future, and I believe it does. And it's such an important topic as well, democracy in its broadest sense, also given the difficulties that we may face this year with all the elections coming up and the transformation of the world in many places, depending on the outcomes of elections here, there, and everywhere. I give you the floor, Ira.
Thank you, Hilja. Thank you very, very much. I'm Ira Harkavy. I'm chair of the International Consortium for Higher Education, Civic Responsibility and Democracy, and founding director of the Netter Center at the University of Pennsylvania. First, I want to thank you, Hilja. I want to thank IAU for your leadership, for making this conversation, this important book launch possible. And I want to indicate what a tremendous opportunity it is for all of us to be together at this crucial time when the work of higher education could not be more significant. Just would provide a bit of background of this work, and I'll build on what my good colleague Matthias said, and the work that the council has done. And congratulations, Matthias, on your new position, which exemplifies what we're here to discuss. This book really stems from a collaboration that does date for 25 years. I didn't realize how long it was. As Dean Acheson said, I was there at the creation. I've been there throughout that period and have seen the growth from a transatlantic partnership led by the values of the Council of Europe and the themes that they've so highlighted: democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, leading to the formation of an international consortium. And that consortium largely has been transatlantic, North America, but included significantly South Africa as playing a crucial role, Australia, and other colleagues from Europe, actually, who joined with us, as well as the Council from Ireland and from the United Kingdom, also as crucial participants. But what has happened recently, and this is a sign of what this meeting is about, in the 2018, we were very fortunate to have the Organization of American States join that cooperation, and in 2019 to have joining with us the IAU. And with that addition of these two crucial organizations, we became truly global. And that global development led to, in 2021, the creation of what in part brings us together is the global cooperation for the democratic mission of higher education, the global cooperation for the democratic mission of higher education. That idea animates us. And it was in 2022 at the Global Forum in Dublin that really is the basis, of course, of this book launch. And that was our first forum that we held, first of all, toward the end of the pandemic. We were reuniting, seeing each other face to face, not just Zoom communication, although this is lovely. Of course, there's a great power in coming together face to face, but it was also the first one hosted by a global cooperation, which meant that more regions were involved, that there were more voices listened to, being heard. There were more ideas. There was more sharing. There was a richness. There was a power. There was, in fact, a broadening understanding that occurs and only could occur in a global setting. And from that conversation, it was clear what brings us together now brought us together then, and what this book exemplifies, that higher education has indeed a crucial role, an essential role to the development, preservation, and maintenance of democracy, that it is an absolute requirement for higher education to be upfront and engaged. And that's something, again, that we have seen since our beginnings in 1999, but grown into this global cooperation. Just to frame it briefly, we all know now, as Hilja indicated in Machas, that democracy is in crisis. It was in crisis then, and it is in greater crisis now. The degree to which democratic institutions are under threat, in which issues of academic freedom and institutional autonomy are under threat, the degree to which not just the expression of ideas, but the development of new ideas and democratic work in solidarity is under threat, is absolutely extreme at this time. And that's why this book launch in part is so important, because we need to work together with greater urgency at this time than in any time before. This book expresses that need. This time amplifies that need. And what we need to do together, I would believe, is to create and expand the global movement that I see actually from all the people around the world on this, to create and expand that global movement and have it dedicated to developing democratic civic universities, universities whose primary mission, whose primary goal is to advance democracy democratically. That seems to be our charge, to do that on campus, to advance democracy democratically on campus, in the community, and the wider society. This book launch, as I see it, bringing these good colleagues together who I could not be more thrilled to be with. This book launch is an important, and I would even argue, a crucial step in moving that work forward, moving that movement forward to build the kind of global movement that is not only needed, but in fact essential at this crucial time historically. So thank you all very much for inviting me to participate. Thank you, Hilja. Thank you, Machas, for the leadership of the council. And I look forward to hearing from my colleagues and learning a great deal more about this very important book that I was pleased to both serve as a co-editor and to participate in that global forum. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for this brilliant or very nice introduction to this important work. I will be fairly brief, and where the IU was thanked, I would like to give that thank you back to all of you on the screen, but also the participants today and all the speakers, all the authors of the book who are in part also in the participants list. So I think it is a joint endeavor. Definitely. So special thanks also indeed go to the editors of the book, and not the least to Sjoerd Bergen, who could not be with us today, but who has been leading this work, as you mentioned, Matthias, for the the past 28 years, 25 years, but it started also before. I have been privileged to follow the work of the international consortium almost from the beginning, but for also to represent the International Association of Universities. But in the beginning, we were more kind of observers, see it unfold, and there were a lot of dynamics of bringing together this international consortium. But in 2019, we decided to join officially, and very proud to have been accepted into the international consortium. And in 21, yes, when we decided to move to a new name, the Global Cooperation for the Democratic Mission of Higher Education, it was because we really strongly believed as an association that together we could make a difference around the world by also there translating actually the very vision and mission of the International Association of Universities, a global NGO called into life in 1950 to actually help build peace in the minds of people through higher education. We believe very strongly in cooperation, working together, bringing the different voices to the table. And that's what we have here on the screen, and also in the participants that you, and the different places where you come from around the world. So yes, it is about building that democracy, and to define how that can actually being shaped and redefined in all the different parts of the world, and shaped and defined jointly, not from one part of the world to the other, but collectively to rethink actually what the role of higher education is. I know that this is something on the agenda of the leadership of higher education on, but we at the IAU, like at the Council or at the Netter Center, and in the international consortium, we strongly believe that universities are not recognized for what they actually bring to society. There is a threat to understanding even the incredible value of higher education when it comes to transforming our society for the better, and societies with an S for the better. And to shape that and to lead into a different future, we have to work together even more strongly. We see, on the contrary, that that countries are siloing themselves out, that they're looking inwards, even continents with the same dynamics. But we hope that this 25-year-long cooperation and the work that is meant to be carried out way into the future will keep these doors open, and will continue to have us in a collective consultation to improve the leadership of university, for leadership to pick this up, to really look at international cooperation as a means to address the issues that we face. And even, well, this was one part of the Global Forum, to also look at how universities with all its different missions, teaching, research, community engagement, campus operations, name it, all these different aspects of a higher education contribute to building a different kind of world that will help everybody coming through the higher education institution, all the different stakeholders, from staff to administrations and the academics, but also to the students and all those who come close to the university, to work together and address the global challenges that we face. They're numerous, and there's a lot of work to be done, but universities can. And I think that one of the big parts this book also contributes to is to better advocate for the strong role of higher education in and also for society. So without further ado, I would like to already thank the speakers who have accepted to come together today and give you a little bit of a glimpse of what their paper was about. Of course, we will not do justice to the full book nor to your papers because the time is always limited in a virtual space, but this is meant as a true appetizer to invite all of you participating online and way beyond when the recording will be made available, to invite you to read the papers and to use also that information possibly as a conversation starter within your own settings, with colleagues at the universities and with colleagues from your different stakeholder groups, with students, because it can help trigger conversations that are so much needed, as Iris said and Matthias underlined as well. So I will give you the floor first, Ahmed. You're a theoretical physicist and a professor at the University of Johannesburg. But I would like to also stress the fact that you're the former CEO of University South Africa, and that in that capacity, you've been an essential agent for change, and that you've been a part of that dynamics of bringing people together, rethinking how universities can change and bring about change. And I give you the floor to highlight pieces of your paper.
Thank you so much, Hilly, and thank you for this kind invitation, and also my greetings to everybody. May we have a better year this year in 2024. Yeah, I just begin by saying that so much has changed since the Global Forum in Dublin, and you know, I as I was reading my paper over the last couple of days, I wondered how it would have been different had I written it today. So I'm going to be focusing largely on South Africa, and just to begin by saying that we've had two major disruptions in the last 5 or 6 years. And those disruptions were really a student uprising in 2015, 2016, 2017. And then, of course, like everywhere else in the world, the COVID-19 pandemic. And both of those disruptions sort of raised really serious questions about the nature of our higher education system. And in particular, students raised the issue around the complicity of higher education in the production of inequality and so on. So very hard, difficult questions. And of course, at the heart of them were student affordability of higher education. And then the other was the big issue around decolonization. But that was all wound around, if you like, this idea that universities had not transformed in the image of the new South Africa that came into being in 1994. So I begin with this idea, you know, that universities are knowledge-intensive social institutions, and they are created by societies because they are deemed to play a positive role in allowing us to have healthy, functioning democracies and economies, and of course they have a critical role in producing young, engaged citizens who are sort of fundamental to building democracy and building a better society and so on. One of the things that I think we have to sort of come to grips with is that there's a crisis facing us in South Africa, which is kind of growing disillusionment with democracy. We are seeing fewer and fewer young people participate in democracy, in the formal side of democracy, that is. And it seems to me, at least, that one of the major reasons for that is this kind of disjuncture between democracy and its ability to produce kind of a more socially just society, if you like. And that seems to me to be a very critical issue. And universities are not cannot be kind of immune from taking on the challenge of that disjuncture, if you like, and it's in that students raise the issue around universities being embedded in the dominant sort of political economy, if you like, of the society, and really just kind of being drawn into the fabric of that imagination. And so it should not be surprising then that universities and university leaders over the last 3 or 4 years have really kind of come together and begun to revisit the purpose of universities and the relationship of universities with their publics and with society more generally. At the heart of that is really this kind of a revisiting of the idea of engagement and this idea that universities have to reimagine the way in which they relate to their publics, but do it through a kind of a way that kind of brings the knowledge project of universities to the fore, if you like. And and the way to do that really is to refocus attention on addressing local challenges facing society, building bridges between the local and the global. So many of the challenges facing societies now, our society in particular, but all societies, are both local and global in scale. And therefore, the importance of universities kind of engaging as bridges between the local and global as a way of ensuring sort of deepening of democracy, that decisions that are taken at the global level aren't just simply kind of implemented, but that there's a kind of role for the universities as interlocutors, if you like, between the local and the global, that becomes increasingly important. And then it's just addressing not just the perception, but also the concerns around the complicity of universities in the production of inequality and so on. And that's not very difficult to kind of understand if we go through it, if we have some time a little later on to go through that. One of the things that in addressing the issue of engagement, perhaps the most important issue that we've been engaging with is the idea of building sustainable engagement, that the idea of kind of building engagement on the basis of soft money is not a good way to do engagement. And what this means in essence is kind of reimagining the knowledge project of universities so that it becomes a part of the functioning of universities rather than something that's done on the edge of universities, that it comes right into the center of the university. It's funded through its core funding and so on. Hilike, I'll just end off by saying that it seems to me at least that one of the major challenges we face is in fact the idea that universities should be functioning at the local and global scales simultaneously. And as I mentioned earlier, to do that sustainably. But at the same time, at the time when there's such deep fragmentation happening in geopolitics, that universities, it seems to me, has this vital role of continuing to have building bridges that allow for the free flow of ideas and people and so on. That would be a major contribution to building global democracy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. I would have a 1,000 questions already to continue the conversation just right there, but we will first go to the to listen to the other speakers and engage in the conversation towards the end. But yes, the knowledge project at the heart of everything that a university does is so important, because many voices nowadays do question the role of universities, see it only as a knowledge production for the happy few. They don't see this as a project that is actually also connecting with society to the full and offering many other new opportunities for the transformation that we so much need in order to deconstruct, in particular, what you said about inequalities, about the siloing at the local level and not engaging with the global, but seeing it too often as a huge issue and a problem rather than an opportunity. Marcelo, I give you the floor. You're the former 12th rector of the University of Campinas, Unicamp in Brazil, and returning now to full professorship of physics. But you as well, way beyond your call of duty, have been instrumental in rethinking the role of higher education at the local level, at the country level, and certainly also internationally and globally. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you, launching this very, very interesting book. I had already the opportunity to look at it, and it's really, really fantastic. So I was asked to give you an overview of what we wrote in our chapter in the book. I wrote this text together with David John Locke, the Secretary General of the Magna Carta Observatory. And in this text, we reflect on the evolution and challenges of higher education institutions, particularly in Latin America, with a focus on the anniversary of the university reform of Cordoba in 1918, so more than 100 years ago. We highlight the transformative impact of this reform, emphasizing achievements such as university autonomy, co-government, academic freedom, and the social mission of the university. In the text, we argue that over the past century, universities have demonstrated resilience by adapting to various realities. However, we emphasize that the need for higher education institutions to align more closely with the societal aspirations and engage with diverse groups in order to maintain our relevance. I mean, the relevance of the higher education sector. We discuss in the text the importance of mission-driven leadership and cite the Magna Carta Universitatum as a guiding document for academic freedom and institutional autonomy. Well, the text then delves into the current challenges we face in higher education, particularly in Latin America, using Brazil as an example. As the previous speaker, many things changed in the politics of the world in the last few years. And of course, this is really dynamic, and it's important to keep up the pace in order to understand what is going on in the geopolitical situation of the world, and of course, what's happening around in different countries. We address issues such as access to higher education, the role of private institutions, and the impact of economic crisis on the sector. We stress the importance of equitable access to education, the need for a diversified higher education system, and the role of government funding in supporting social inclusion initiatives. A significant portion of the text is dedicated to the concept of university extension, as it is known in Brazil, or usually known as outreach universities, of the third mission of the university. We argue that universities should play a more active role in our communities, engaging in projects that contribute to public policies, social services, and continuing education. We highlight the lack of recognition for the contributions universities make to society and advocate for effective communication strategies to convey our value. In conclusion, we underscore the vital role of higher education institutions in promoting democracy, sustainability, and social justice. We call for universities to prioritize effective communication, engage with various stakeholders, and demonstrate our significance in shaping a better future for all. Well, this is a summary of the chapter, and I hope the audience here can have the opportunity to look at it. I am open to any discussion, and I would really like a feedback on that. Thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you. I think the topic of social justice really is at the heart of much of what you've been presenting. And it's very nice also this cooperation with the Magna Carta Observatory and the value-based leadership, the value-based higher education that was also already highlighted by Ahmed and by Ira and Matthias. And this effective communication is something that we could get back to well, because there is something about the way in which universities communicate that does not resonate outside of the walls of an institution. And that is where opportunities are missed. And that's where the work that we've initiated also under the leadership of the Council of Europe to a great extent is to look at this local mission of a university, how to define it together, but how to make it work and heard. So maybe we have the time to also delve deeper into that. Without further ado, I would like to give you the floor. Martina, you're now in Australia, so yet again another part of the world, and thank you for bringing that part of the world thanks to your presence there. You're the former president of the European Student Union, also known as ESU. And you're now still on the governing council of the Magna Carta, and you work a lot on education policies at different levels. So I'm very pleased to give you the floor and highlight as well the points that you would like to contribute to this important conversation. Martina, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the floor and the opportunity to be here. Despite the fact that I'm no longer a student representative, I'd like to rest assure our audience that what you find in the paper is the product of the experiences that I had over 8 years in the student movement while I was studying for my bachelor and then my master degree in the biomedical field. So this is really thanks to the people that I had absolute privilege to work with throughout these 8 years. And so the approach that I wanted to take when writing this was to look into existing studies of community engagement being practically put into practice and being integrated as part of students' study programs. And I wanted to put a spotlight on that, and with accrediting student engagement in university programs would be a way to upscale opportunities for universities and their communities to form deeper relationships in their local communities and hopefully to address persistent inequalities. So in doing this, I wanted to identify what were the success factors and conditions that led universities to symbiotically engage with their communities so that the benefit would be on all sides of the spectrum. And I'll mention some quick examples that I really enjoyed finding in my research. So one was a university project addressing food insecurity by the Washington State University. And I'll just highlight all the disciplines that they had brought together, not only from the university, but also from the community, coming from the education disciplines, crop and soils, horticulture, history, human development, landscape architecture, communication, merchandising, design, sociology, and digital technology. Of course, you can have big projects for community engagement being organized by the universities, but then you can, of course, have sort of less structured forms of community engagement more led by the students. Taking the example of when a student is active either in student unions or in local organizations. So there are many different forms. And based on these studies, what I wanted to extract were recommendations to contribute to a possible policy architecture for universities to organize community engagement in a way that this policy is adaptable to their needs, is inclusive to the wider public, and is also meaningful in terms of its overall impact for the university and the community. And because of my role within ESU and at the time that I was active in ESU, our efforts to internationalize our movement and cooperate with regional unions in Africa and Latin America, in Canada, and in Australia and New Zealand culminated to the establishment of the Global Student Forum. We now have the space where student leaders are deciding at a global level what our education should look like, and where these recommendations can be taken forward. I'll just quickly mention that these recommendations would ideally allude to a more baseline architecture of what community engagement how community engagement can be tailored to a university. It's not only in setting the goal, which I do point out in the 1998 World Declaration on Higher Education. We already had a statement on the goal of community engagement that universities should take all necessary measures to reinforce their service to the community, especially their activities aimed at eliminating poverty, intolerance, violence, illiteracy, hunger, and so on. So the commitment and goal is already there. What this article tries to propose is an architecture for it, a common set of recommendations for how we should engage with all the actors who have a responsibility to play in this. I see my time is coming to an end, so I'll quickly just say that I'm grateful that I can remain committed to supporting this discussion with students and university leaders more at the ground level now, together with the Magna Carta Observatory. I'm very grateful that I'm here alongside my colleagues in the Governing Council, who have not only contributed to this book, but also to activities with the Council and the Observatory for students globally to engage with us and the network of university leaders that the MCO has. So I'm really excited for this work to be taken further forward. And yes, thank you for the time.
This is excellent, because indeed, if I imagine all the students would pick this up around the world, then we would have a real opportunity for transforming much of the things that are happening. What I see in big organizations, and before I give you the floor, Ronnie, is just one point I want to make. I see in big organizations that very often a lot of attention is being placed on education. And when we speak about education, it's often pre-primary to secondary and then lifelong learning. And bizarrely enough, the higher education sector is kind of left aside and not considered as the key player when it comes to transforming our societies, or not as part of the entire movement and sequencing between pre-primary through to lifelong learning through higher education. And that is also what the book points to, is this important need to valorize the work of higher education and all the people and the stakeholders within, and how their contribution can help transform the world. But Ronnie, you have much better things to say, so the floor is yours.
Not sure about that, Hilligja. Thank you very much for the invite, first of all. I'm just putting my timer on here. Hilligja, thank you very much for the invite. Two challenges suggest to myself from the opening speeches. Matthias threw out the issue of policy relevance, and he was very polite about academics, but the reality is that most academics are not very good at making research policy relevant. So I think that's a challenge to us. Martina threw out another challenge: student engagement in civic engagement. In Dublin, we've always struggled with that, in making it sustainable, partly for reasons you know well, Martina, that student leaderships come and go after a year or two. But I think without cracking that particular nut, we won't really go anywhere, because obviously students are a very major part of the body of a university. I won't be addressing those, but I'm sitting with them. What I'm going to do, Hilligja, with your permission, is reflect briefly on the chapter I did, which is probably the very last one in the book, coming out of the Dublin Forum, which got me thinking of, this is great and all these people are here, but what does it mean? You know, where do we go from now? And then, if I get time, briefly on Latin America. I think where we're at is at a tipping point. This is in the article, that there's a tipping point for the university that can't go back to the old ways, that then the University of Enterprise that we had in the 1990s and 2000s, that I think was seen to fail with COVID, because COVID was addressed in a much more interventionist manner, and it wasn't really business that did it, but the university as a social institution. So this tipping back, this tipping point can't. We don't have a model out there that we can just pick off the shelf and say, well, we can talk about sustainable democracy. We can talk about all these things, but what does it mean in terms of the design of the university? What does it mean in terms of the procedures of the university? Because people slip back into the old ways of doing things naturally enough, and people have an attachment to what they think was the golden past. Oh yes, we used to have collegiality in the 80s or the 90s, depending on how old you are. Yes, we used to have collegiality, but we don't have it now. Well, it was never that simple, and universities were always quite hierarchical and bureaucratic organizations. So in a way, what I'm making a plea for or a push for is a genuine rethinking of what the university is about. And I think we can be grateful to the students in South Africa who said, well, you know, universities, what is the purpose of them? You know, what do they add to my life if they're not addressing the key issues of the day? So that's general thinking. But wearing another hat, my Latin American hat, I can only concur with Marcelo that in Latin America there has been great ferment in this area of civic engagement, university extension, going back to the Cordoba reform of 1918. And Cordoba is a lovely city, by the way. It's even nicer than Spanish Cordoba. You really should go to Cordoba. It's the seat of learning in Argentina. It's an old city up in the mountains, but it's a real seat of not only learning but political dispute and that. But anyway, in 1919, students rose up against a very hierarchical aristocratic system and carried out a reform that spread throughout Latin America, even though it's not known that well outside of Latin America. But it went to Mexico, it went to Brazil, it went to the Andean countries. And basically the idea that professors had a job for life went out the the window, thankfully. And the whole social mission issue came on to the agenda. And what I would like to see is that we internationalize this debate. No offense to anybody, but I mean, we're always talking about the North Atlantic as though it's the norm, as though the issues of the North Atlantic universities are universal, and they're not. The issues are very different in South Africa. They're very different in South America. They're very different in India. I mean, we haven't even touched on the issues there, but we really should, I think, if we're going to discuss these things seriously. But that's my 5 minutes. Hilja, I hand back to you, and thank you very much.
Yeah, for all of you, it's a pity that that we decided to only take 5 minutes for each.
I think it's good.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. But there is
Good.
so much more to be discussed, and we're lucky because we will have those opportunities, definitely. One question to all of you here is, first, how would you like to react to the presentations that you've heard? And if I give each of you 1 minute to maybe react to what has been said so far, before we get into a larger discussion. And there, I hope that the participants will contribute questions in the Q&R space, but we also have already drafted a few questions for you that Irina will be very pleased to ask. But first, can I get back to you, Matthias, then Ira, then Ahmed, then Marcelo, then Ronnie, to react to the other presentations, if you would allow. So Matthias. Martina as well, of course. Yeah, you're muted.
Very, very briefly, because I'd really like to give maximum time to other participants to come in and ask questions, so it's not just conversation among us. I was struck by the point made by Ahmed, which I think is central not only when it comes to the democratic mission of higher education, but challenges that we face as democracies everywhere in the world, and the connection that he has made with the issue of social justice, because that sense of perceived and or real injustice and inequality is what is driving, I think, many of the trends and that we are seeing, and that they are representing a threat to our democracy. In some way, a lot we can see, a lot of things that we see and react to are symptoms of something that is actually rather better. And I'm amused to see that there is a question from an anonymous participant asking about the role of the universities, especially in the West, as breeding ground for the woke narrative and the promotion of DEI. So I'm not going to try to respond to that question, particularly because I never really figured out what this woke really means. But I wanted to bring, it does actually reinforce that this is one of the questions that cannot be excluded from the conversation. And I just like to respond to Ronaldo that I appreciate self-criticism about the academia's competencies for policy making, but I think that from our point of view, you seem much better than perhaps you would self-critically assess yourself. For us, from our point of view, this has been an extremely important cooperation. So we wouldn't be able to do it as well as we do without having that input and that conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments, Ira.
So I was, as always, very impressed by my colleagues' presentations and learned a great deal. And one of the things, of course, is to see the themes that resonate across some of their conversations and discussions. And it seems to me that there are two-sided issues an issue that has two very important sides. That is the question of the university's role and how it's in fact viewed in society, and its need to step up was very clear across the board. But simultaneously, there was a powerful internal critique of universities as they now function. So it's this simultaneous notion that universities need to stand up or being pressed in ways by society, that there is this crisis of democracy, but there is a crisis in the way universities currently function. And they currently function in ways in which the knowledge project, to use what Ahmad has spoke about eloquently today and has in the past, is in fact something that needs to change. It needs to change so that universities take, in fact, a role and a stand on the crucial issues of the time and deal precisely with questions of inequality, of social justice and democracy. That needs to be on the front end burner of universities. It's not just the critique, and I will perhaps answer later about the woke question, but let me just put it is not just the question of universities being criticized on issues of academic freedom and institutional autonomy. The question is universities for what? For what? And our colleagues were brilliant in laying that out. And the for what are questions of democracy, of inclusion, of diversity, of social justice, of sustainability, of anti-racism, that those are the themes that in this day and time need to be addressed. And what Martina always eloquently expresses, and Ronnie picked up on, is the role of students and the democratic nature of the interactions on campus need to be looked at, including the significant role of students. So in summary, I really see these two major themes: the theme of universities' role in society, why it needs to stand for these democratic principles, but universities as institutions and as scholars and individually need to take up the mantle and stand for those issues of democracy and change the knowledge project so that it's higher education for what? For democracy, social justice, equality, and diversity. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that Tony Gallagher in the chat is totally agreeing with you, as he also stresses the fact that the tasks keep growing and that the task itself keeps getting harder. we fully agree with you, Tony. It's we certainly are not out of office for a long time. Ahmed.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I think for me at least, there are two things that arise. The one is just the way in which globalization, with all of its kind of paraphernalia, like rankings and all of that, kind of how it has kind of torn universities away from the nation state and from their local context, from the local communities and so on. And that's sort of, Ronnie kind of refers to the issue of policy making and so on. And I think partly it's got to do with that. I mean, that, that there's a kind of this idea that we don't really, that we operate in another space, if you like. So that's the one side, the one thing I wanted to mention, and hence the importance of really going back to ensuring that engagement is on the agenda again in a big way. The second is kind of almost opposite to that, which is to say, universities have a role to play in building bridges between societies across the world at a time of great fragmentation in geopolitics. So for me, those are almost kind of speaking to opposite ends, but in fact, we have to bring those together, it seems to me. And then going back to this idea that this shouldn't be just like a philosophical idea, but it's about the knowledge project. Because if it's not about the knowledge project, then it's a political project. And then it doesn't take us anywhere. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ahmed. That's also why on the agenda of the latest IU Global Conference, we put on the agenda the importance of intercultural learning and dialogue and how to build bridges between these societies or people or whichever instances that don't talk to each other anymore. And how can universities actually contribute to reinstating the importance of fostering intercultural learning and dialogue and appreciation for the diversity instead of siloing up and dividing, and really zoom back into what does this mean, this knowledge project. So Marcelo, would you like to react to this as well?
Well, I would agree with my colleagues. In fact, if we look at the last, I cannot go, I should not even go far enough. In the last 5 years, 6 years, in my opinion, we have to be really critical to ourselves as a system, as a group of higher education. We have failed. We couldn't show to society the importance of science, the importance of technology, the importance of education, and we keep having more and more examples on that. Here in Latin America, as I mentioned before, with the situation of Argentina now, with the new government trying to destroy the public university system, in many examples in Europe, and now the debate in the United States that we are all watching around the world, because it's a really, really important political place. So I think that we should really, really, as a higher education sector, be really critical on what we have been doing and how to show to society the importance of higher education for the future of the world and society as we know it. So this is basically really, really what we should discuss about.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Martina.
I try to take it from a less pessimistic perspective of whether we failed. When I'd rather put it to the policy side of it, as to how our policies have not adapted quick enough for us to be prepared, for our universities to be prepared, and for our universities then to prepare our students. I mean, and again, I refer to this in the article, that it's a quarter of a century since the World Declaration of 1998 that said that service to communities should be well embedded into higher education. And how far along are we on that goal? Which points to a lot of things. On what I remember our discussions in Dublin as well. I think it was Professor Ahmed who was also referring to the fact of that universities our policies are still targeted towards producing subject matter experts, when the problems in our community are more and more requiring interdisciplinary knowledge. But that takes a global movement to change that. It's great that there are some universities that are taking initiative, but we can't keep relying on having vague policies with the hope that some universities will take the stick and the others will follow suit at some point. The fact that we're still operating within just the walls of universities, our understanding that learning just happens within universities, and the knowledge economy, that is still an old mentality, and we need to be able to describe that and document it. Because from the experience that I've seen within the European Students' Union is the more we clarified what we meant in policy, the more later on it was easier to get more countries on board what we're saying. What do I mean? On quality assurance, we have now really foolproof policies on student participation in quality assurance, but that took a lot of time to define that policy very well. Academic freedom as well is, it's over the past decade or so that these policies have been more clearly defined, and therefore action is a bit easier to take on through cooperation with governments. So yes, I would see it from the point of view as to how our policies need to change and how more well defined can we be in them.
Big questions there as well. Very important. There was one question in the chat as well from Zainab Zim. Is there a memorandum agreement between universities all around the world? And thank you. And then the rest of the messages. And thank you to you all and for the clarifications that the book may bring about. But a memorandum agreement between universities. Interesting. Isabelle Thoman put in the chat the opportunity to look at what the Magna Carta is suggesting with the Magna Carta Observatory and the text, the Universitatum. Also, I would like to suggest also to look at the work of the International Association of Universities, which was called into life by UNESCO in 1950, to actually bring the universities from around the world together to do exactly what Ahmed also called for, to build these bridges between the universities from around the world. And over the decades since, the IAU Administrative Board, each time composed of representatives from the 5 continents, we've tried to define where an association can actually rally universities around these topics. So I'm not making publicity for the IAU, I'm making publicity for the vision and mission of the association and what the aim is in response to Zainab and also this need for cooperation. I would like to also refer to the work of UNESCO for that matter, and the report on the futures of higher education and the roadmap that came out of the latest World Conference. It's been criticized a lot, yet it's a roadmap that has been co-crafted and co-designed with many voices from around the world. And there's, of course, always a limited opportunity in the context of the limited number of words and concepts to integrate everything. But I truly believe from where I sit and how I contributed to the process that there was this idea that we need to focus again on this building the bridges, focusing on internationalization that is fair and inclusive, have the many voices in. So I would certainly also urge the participants to look at those documents as starting points for conversations, but either to deconstruct it and then also focus more on other reform processes like the Cordoba reform process that Ronnie, you alluded to. But there are these many opportunities to engage with these dynamics that bring the universities together and work together. So Ronnie, the floor is yours for 1 minute as well. Irina, then on to you. So Ronnie.
Thank you, Hilja. I'll be brief. So, 2 points really only. The first one, coming back to what Martina was saying about the pessimism in the room that you sometimes see. I would normally go along with a saying that Antonio Gramsci, the Italian thinker, said. I think he borrowed it from someone else, but it's pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. That yes, we should think critically of these issues, but I mean, going into depression doesn't really help anybody, does it? The other point is in relation to what geographers call the scales debate, and I see in the chat there people talking about the local and the global and so on. The risk of being controversial, because I never like being controversial, do I? The global discussion is fine, and I am an internationalist and all the rest of it, but I do think that universities they make or break at a local level, and I think that's the way where these linkages with society need to be forged, and I think international associations and the UN and all of those are fine. They're great. They do a good job, but I think that rethinking. Do you remember, Ira, we had a conference called the Local Democratic Mission, which we held in Dublin as well. So in terms of the politics of scale, theorists are going back to the local level, which of course is global as well. We know that, but it's a plea for the local. I'm over to you again, Hilja. All yours.
Very much. I would like to introduce and give the floor to Irina, who has been instrumental in the whole process leading to the publication of this book. Irina, you are the manager of information gathering and you're curator of best practices in digital education at the European Commission's Digital Education Hub. And you're also editorial assistant of this publication in particular. And you've been pushing all the authors around and making sure that the publications would come in, and so that we have a very nice publication that is available open access on the Council of Europe website. So Irina, the floor is yours for the Q&A.
Thank you very much. I think it was a privilege for me to read the contributions first, so this is always very nice to have. And I see we already have a couple of questions in the Q&A section. And I will take the first one with a kind asking you, the panelists, to answer as if you see that you have something to contribute to. I will not give the floor to one in particular. I will let you know, you let me know which one of you would like to address this first. So we go to the first question, which says, what is your take on universities, especially in the West and other democratic countries, as breeding ground for the woke narrative and the promotion or over-promotion of DEI? And I mean that I suppose that would go into the diversity, equity, and inclusion by DEI. So any of you would like to take this first question?
Well, I guess I could, in part because it's certainly affecting the United States. As I transition to that question, I am going to respond to my colleague Ronnie Monk's statement about the local. I think one of the issues of our work we've done to develop a global movement is it's rooted in the local work of institutions in their societies and in their communities. The idea that what we're focusing on, this will transition to the DEI discussion, is focusing on what we might term universal problems like social justice, democracy, inequality as they're manifested locally. The idea is not just a general collaboration, but one rooted in lived experience. And that's why this book was so powerful, because it was rooted in local context and connected to wider issues. So I think that's a very significant issue about how to build the work and build the movement. On the issue of DEI, I'm going to turn, in fact, to a very good statement made by my dear colleague, Tony Gallagher online here. In fact, there has been, and that is the issue, the extent that these attacks, which are, I think, very much overstated, very much have a political agenda. coming very much from a right-wing conscious effort. There was a major piece in the New York Times about the work of the Claremont Institute. The Claremont Institute has mobilized consciously to raise DEI as an issue for attacking both the Democratic Party and progressive ideas. This is largely an attempt, and not every DEI office is appropriate, works well, is decent. I think there are problems with some of those approaches, but they're minor. The real issue of DEI is to do what universities should do, be places of diversity, of equity, of inclusion. I know as a teacher how much richer my classrooms are now that I have students of every background, color, and shade in those rooms. How important it is for each of our societies, and I certainly can speak to the United States, that education is not for the privileged few of a privileged background, of a privileged a position of racially or ethnically, but are open for all members of the society. That higher education serves as a means for not just economic improvement for everyone, but for full democratic participation and citizenship. DEI may have some of its formal approaches may be somewhat problematic, but the attack on woke and the attack on DEI are political attacks. They are attacks designed to reverse the progress we've made. It is designed to reverse the real issue of the progress along both of inclusion, diversity, equity, but also issues of democracy and anti-racism. The very groups, and I will conclude with this, the Claremont Institute have a distorted view of what higher education is about. The very themes we discussed about the largest social purposes are pulled out. Higher education becomes a place to secure and preserve current privilege. It becomes a place, in fact, that stands for a ideological narrative designed to breed nationalism and a self-centered focus on, in fact, the appropriateness of current conditions and the current domination of current groups politically and economically. So in fact, these attacks that exist and on DEI are broader attacks on the purposes of universities to be sources of educating students for democratic citizenship, attacks on universities as being centers for the development of ideas and the contributions to the ongoing improvement of human life, and they're actually attacks on the heart of democracy itself. So I think the DEI is both overstated, problematic, and deeply aligned with political right-wing agendas.
Thank you for this very passionate reaction, Ira. Is there anybody else who would like to react to this a bit more, to reflect on this issue? I think it's more a US issue, so I think maybe we will move on to the next question. And I would like to actually read everything else. We're thanking from Romina Miorelli. She's thanking us for the relevant and timely publication, finding it very inspirational. Especially with the importance of the third mission of universities in contributing to strengthening democracy, and that Latin America has a lot of experience on that. But looking at the open future, I find the conversation is unfortunately going into another direction, putting universities more and more as a function of the economy, as a producer of knowledge that is profitable and graduates that are useful for the labor market. Any thoughts on how we may be working against the potential of universities to strengthen democracy? So it's, well, maybe I would start with Marcelo addressing this, because we're talking a bit about Latin America.
Well, of course, the economics is always present in our world, but we were discussing here the whole possibilities of universities in every field. So, in fact, the main idea of the book is that working locally with communities, having this so-called third mission, what we call here extension or different or services to communities, absolutely fundamental for the development of a democratic society. And of course, the universities play a fundamental role in understanding the universe, the world, life, everything, and everything should come together where to be it. And this is maybe, in my opinion, the most complicated mission of the university, is how to balance all these different ideas and projects that the university should take care of. Basic science, applied science, extension, community services, outreach, and of course a good communication with society as a whole, to show that without good universities, without a strong higher education sector, we don't have any future at all.
Thank you, Marcelo. Please, Ahmed.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Now, this is one of the most challenging questions we face, I think, and we have to pay attention to it. I think it's an important question. And I just heard the other day a statistic that 50% of funding for research in the world goes to military spending. So so that's a clear indication that there's something really pertinent about this question. Yeah, my sense is that alongside all the stuff that we are talking about today, there's a need for us to focus on, let me put it this way, to focus attention on what we mean by the public good of higher education, and really to go back to that very basic question. I'm engaged in a whole range of work on open science, and the one thing that really bothers me is that governments around the world love the idea of open science. So the big question is, what kind of open science are we talking about? What is the purpose of this shift towards open science? And it's about the issue of foregrounding, a debate about the public good of science and the public good of open science. So, for me, it seems to me that we have to engage that issue again, that it's not just simply about, assuming that higher education is a public good. Of course, it's a public good, but so much has changed in the world that this kind of it's become a slippery concept now, I feel like. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Ahmed. I see that Ronaldo has something to react to this as well. So please, Ronaldo.
Yes, thanks. Yes, well, the question was about Latin America, and I think Romina is absolutely right that often lip service is paid to civic engagement, and the reality is universities are engaging in economic cooperation. However, there's a different view to it. I even used to hear in Dublin, the university goes and basically it's selling out its graduate labor to big IT companies and so on. That's the economic engagement. I worked for a year in Loja in the south of Ecuador, and they started talking about links with enterprise. I thought, oh, same old. But it wasn't. It was a poor region of Ecuador. The university worked, for example, on issues around the coffee industry, around cattle, around drought. And obviously, yes, they were collaborating with business, but I would see that as not incompatible with the civic mission. So I think we need to be careful with our critique. Thank you.
Thank you. And I was wondering if Martina has something to react as we're talking about graduate employability and going back to students. I feel like maybe she has something to respond on that as well. Maybe some thoughts.
On graduate employability, I'm going to jump back a little bit to the topic that I was keeping notes on, which is the issue that was mentioned that's going on in the US. Because I do think we have to keep in mind that despite it being centered in the US, I also feel there's a domino effect. What happens in the US could tend to happen in other political scenarios around the world. I see it also sometimes in Malta, that a narrative by our politicians starts being spread and people start to follow that narrative, but it's a narrative that takes away the attention to where we really should be focusing on the major issues that our country needs to be solving on. And I think that's a tactic many politicians could apply, regardless of whether it's in the US or here. And Because I also have I've always had my heart in diversity, equity, and inclusion policies when I was also within ESO. I really feel that it's also important to state that I don't think we're overemphasizing these policies as such. We're not emphasizing them enough. The percentage of our population that has had access to higher education is minimal. We're really far from where we should be in terms of access to higher education. And there's a lot of work that is being done also by alternative providers, not only higher education institutions now that are proliferating at the moment, offering short courses to graduates now, back to graduate employment actually. That this really opens the space not to show that there's a lot going on in terms of education, but the narrative of the population is being dominated by politicians, and this is what we need to be focusing on: how to show this tactic for what it is, and how to bring the conversation back to what our issues are, and what higher education is going to start doing to be more inclusive and to be reaching a much greater percentage of the population than it has already.
Thank you very much, Martina. I see Hillegas has something to add on this topic, or maybe other topics.
Yeah, very quickly, thank you for giving me the floor. Very quickly, I think that what we also are not very good at is that universities do reach out to many more beyond the walls of a university. And that's where sometimes the return on the investment, the point you made, Ronnie, about the fact that 50% of funding goes to military spending. Was it you who said that? I think so, huh? No, Ahmed, you did. Sorry.
But I could have made it.
You could have made it. But there is also this very famous phrase by Nelson Mandela, if you think that education is expensive, try ignorance. I mean, we don't spend enough on higher education. We don't see the importance of it, and that's where we let it slide away into economic perceptions and privatization of every part of the institution, to the point where the whole knowledge project itself becomes something that is much more of an economic principle than opportunity to really educate and higher educate people into something different. I just wanted to make a very quick point as well that is more technical. We were supposed to also welcome René White, the provost and executive vice president for academic affairs at the New School in New York. She's also a professor of sociology like Ronnie. And she wrote us a message that unfortunately she could not make it and was very sad about it. But she would have tackled these points as well from the cultural perspective, that there's a lot of emphasis nowadays on this need to market the higher education sector, to provide for jobs, to have a shortcut between the higher education and the skills that people acquire in order to enter the labor market. Of course, these are essential issues. Everybody wants to have a job when educated, and you want to have an opportunity to also benefit from that part of your education. But higher education is much broader than that simple skills discourse tailoring to a labor market of today that will not be existent tomorrow. So it comes with the opportunity to elevate people into a different kind of thinking that then they bring back to the society in which they live, that local mission that and Ronnie, you made so strongly, the opportunity to bring that back to their homes. Yesterday at the UNESCO conference, it was made clear through a whole set of statistics that if women are not educated, society will never change. They will not have had the opportunity to bring that back, to educate their children, to educate their husbands, to change the society and to transform for something new. So we have to, all of us, advocate for this importance of without strong institutions or a strong sector, we will go nowhere. So I wanted to re-emphasize that point as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hilge. Ira? Oh, Matthias, please. Please.
Ira raised his hand before me, so I would.
Yes,
I dropped my hand before.
I did. No,
Hilger expressed exactly the point I was going to make, and she
okay.
expressed it better. So I decided it was preferable to lower my hand. That's all.
Now we're running out of time. I don't want to start another debate, but I'm returning also to the questions we're getting in Q&A. And there is the second one, a question about whether gathering together and advocating the idea of democracy at universities somehow bringing risks and threats to the notion of the academic freedom. And I think it's an interesting question, but I think also it's an illustration of the change that we have experienced without even perhaps sometimes noticing it. I mean, leaving aside the question of whether advocating a civilization and model that is based on a freedom of opinion and expression and thought would somehow be detrimental to ideological alternatives that are based on its opposite. But I think what strikes me is that we have somehow accepted that we're discussing the democracy and its components and values in the context of left-right politics.
Yes.
And I think that is something that we somehow become a normal, and that the notions that we speak about also today when we talk about the mission of higher education, and when we talk about inclusion, when we talk about social justice, somehow this, by a growing number of people, is associated only with one part, or extreme part of one part of the political spectrum. And I think 2 points. I mean, not to be very. First, I think this is something that should be of the biggest concern to people who define and feel they are conservative and on the right side of political spectrum. I think that is a serious problem for them if they accept that their political and absolutely legitimate political views that maybe also mine are somehow defined in opposition to those values. And the second point is that also for somebody from Europe and European point of view, and somebody who has been studying the and as a part of the European post-war project, which is built exactly on those very values and these notions of social justice and inclusion and solidarity and respect for human dignity, and which has been put in place and sort of codified into a legal and political institutional system, was done exclusively by post-war generation politicians, which were exclusively from the conservative People's Party, right side party of the political spectrum. So I just putting there, and I just, a reflection of how we got from where we were to where we are, that somehow democracy has become only one of the possible alternatives which we have on the our political market right now, because it's a notion that I think it carries a lot of risks, but it is a reality.
Thank you very much, Matthias, for this intervention. I think you were referring to the last question that we have in the Q&A, and maybe other speakers would like to address this part, saying that what does it mean for higher education to unify around democracy and to speak up with one voice on its importance? And does that risk limiting academic freedom by narrowing the range of questions that are considered valid for debate? Yes, Sarah, please.
Very, very briefly to that and indicate it's really just echoing Mathias's point. The issue that Ahmad raised about issues of also what we mean by common good, and it also relates to that. The issue is, what is academic freedom for? It is for academic responsibility and for advancing the common good. We're given that freedom because our work is designed to make a difference and improve the world. And certainly in terms of the United States, the founding of United States higher education was rooted in the democratic idea and the democratic principle that the purpose of higher education was in fact to help realize the unrealized promise of American democracy. If one looks around the world, the question that we've seen in the coalition and the work we've done, it is rooted in the democratic idea that in fact it is not just the question of the goal of democracy, it's the process of democracy. So rather than limiting academic freedom, it is in the process of democratic dialogue and the process of working out ideas together. The process of democracy itself is also a hallmark of the work. And in fact, the issue that Mathias raised, that there are goals, there are principles of higher education. It's not just for the market, it is to educate citizens. And it may very well be that at the premier purpose of universities and premier purpose of higher education, particularly at this time, is to educate empathetic, engaged, active democratic citizens for a democratic society. And that is not a right or left principle. It is a principle of a functioning of a good society and moral principles, which the Council of Europe has been steadfast on and has served as, in some ways, as a light for this work. There are moral principles that serve as central to the work of universities and central to society. And there are no more central principle than the principle of democracy, inclusion, diversity, and engagement of all citizens. And universities have, as society has, the principle of democracy as central to the work it does. So rather than ideological, is in fact central to a good functioning university, a good functioning society, and a decent quality of life for all citizens.
Thank you very much, Hara. Mathias, please, do you have anything to add on this?
No, I'm just wanted to thank Ira, of course, for also reacting, but I just want to apologize because I will have to leave, having a next meeting starting. But thank you so much, everybody. Again, I've already had the introduction for the book, for the contribution, for the cooperation, and for today's session, which I found was extremely interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. And yes, we have extended a bit beyond what we had initially as time. So I would ask you maybe to have 1 minute of final ideas and thoughts to share with the participants. I know we could have debated far more than this, but let's just consider this as the starting point, maybe for a new webinar on the book once people have a chance to actually read it more. So please, let's start. Maybe Ira will let you start, and we will go in as we have initially started in the first part. Please.
I just want to thank Hilja and thank all my colleagues for the incredibly rich and important discussion. I can't think of a better launch for this book. I can't think of a better time for a launch and a more significant time to do it. And we have a lot of work to do, and this is a very important step for 2024 and beyond. And thank all of you again for your contributions and for our ongoing partnership, our ongoing cooperation, and the work that we've been doing together and will do with greater moment and focus than ever before in the year ahead. Thank you all very much. Thank you, particularly Hilja and IAU, for this good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Ahmed, maybe a few words?
Thank you so much, Irina, and I'd like to thank everybody too, and especially for inviting me to be a part of this panel. Just to say that I think that there's a singularly important and historical role for universities, as we head into the future. We are in a very precarious position. I mean, the sustainability development goals, we are falling far short of where we should be in many aspects of them. Those are intensely local and global. And universities have a unique position to be centrally involved in them. And I think that, the issue of democracy is not just an issue about our societies, but it's also an issue for the future of universities. Universities flourish in democratic circumstances. And we have to understand that there's a need for us to pay attention to that, it seems to me at least. And and I hope that the next meeting of the Global Forum will really take up these issues again, and take them up in a way that really provides the basis for a strong global conversation about these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Important words to take into the next forum. Marcelo, how about a few thoughts from your side to leave us processing?
Thank you. Thank you again for inviting me for this very interesting conversation. I fully agree with Ahmed and everyone who talked before. If we as a matter of fact, if we were conscious about what is going on today, we shouldn't be discussing anything else than the global warming. We don't know the future of, from tomorrow. And so we are seeing a lot of, different perspectives leading to a very complicated situation around the world. And we as a university sector, university leaders should be aware of the urgency of these discussions and how to really try to reach the society as a whole. This should be, in my personal opinion, our main goal in the next few years. Try to better communicate what universities are good for, as mentioned before by Ira, and why we do exist. And this is trying to break this bubble that we are always facing, that we talk to ourselves and try to reach more and more people in this debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Martina, since you've been more on the positive side and taking from Marcelo's thoughts, maybe you can come up with something positive on this.
Yeah, I'm sorry for being a little bit pessimistic, but this, the world that we are living in is very complicated,
It is indeed.
It is indeed. I would just say that I do think this book indeed does play a role in unifying higher education around democracy. I think that is a nice way to go about the last question that we had as well, because it brings perspectives from all over the world, and more we're finally finding commonalities to our actions. So I do hope that the policymaking field, now that I left it and I'm done with it and I'm more on the project side and doing the research of these policies, I do hope that I will be researching more action-oriented policies and less goal-oriented. I think by now we have a quarter of a century and more worth of declarations and agreements to the goals where we want higher education to go. I think now it's more time for action-oriented targets that can be evaluated over the short term and the long term, because without unifying around democracy, we're not going to be having any principles like academic freedom or such values protected. So yes, pessimistic end, but I hope to have started optimistically.
But also hopeful. Thank you, Martina. Ronnie?
Yeah, thanks. Matthias threw out a challenge there at the end, and I'm not sure to what extent everybody picked it up. I thought he was saying that post-war reconstruction in Europe was driven by conservative forces, if I heard him correctly, and that's certainly the case if you look at Germany. But then if you take an international perspective, the right-left divide is not so easy to go beyond. But I think I'm saying that there's rich discussion to be had on the nature of democracy, the contradictions of democracy on a global scale. But for now, I would also like to join everybody to thank everyone who came along thank the organizers, and thank the people that engage in the chat. It's been a great conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ronnie, and thank you for all the participants that are still here. Hillige, I think that the last words would belong to you. So there you go.
Well, thank you to you, Irina, for leading this conversation brilliantly and to unleash some of the extra thoughts that were not possible given the initial limited time. I think this webinar will definitely inform our conversation here at the IAU when it comes to defining the topic upon which to develop a program for the IAU International Conference 2024, because I think we need to really bring this to the table at as many fora as we can, and there also ensure that we have many voices in and discuss this. And we have to always deconstruct the understanding that it will come from one part of the world or the other. We really have to bring the many voices and build these very precious bridges between our realities. And I heard very clear and sound many of the messages, including the importance of universities to address the local challenges that we have to address. And these can be informed by what is happening elsewhere in the world. So that's where this constructive dialogue always is key to advancing anything that we do, and ensure that we have these deep conversations about what it means to be a university and to actually serve society to the full. So I think I will listen again to this webinar and try to distill some of the thoughts and bring that also to our next conference, which is just one forum, but there are many others. So the recordings will be made available. And the book is available for free download and for circulation. And we hope the book will have a life of its own and trigger much more conversations in many different other settings. We also had with us in the chat many leaders from higher education from many different parts of the world. That was fun to see because it means that the topic is of importance. We also had Yadira with us from the Organizations of American States. Also very nice. She reconfirmed the commitment of the OAS to this work together, moving into the future. And you have a European research area conference coming up, Irina, so where maybe these topics will also be tabled, and that's another opportunity. So thanks to all. I think yes, there is a lot of food for thought and many problems out there. It's the role of universities also to find ways in offering the student population opportunities to make a difference, and not only saddle them with the problems without any opportunity for finding solutions. So that's a big task for universities ahead. Thank you.